Well, a very good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to BW Healthcare World. Today, we have a rather tech-studded panel lined up for you, where we will be discussing the emerging technologies, trends, new innovations, and softwares that are reshaping our healthcare sector for the times to come. And to discuss this, we are joined by our eminent panelists having expertise in their own respective domains. First, we have Mr. Girish Raghavan, Vice President of Digital Engineering and Technology, GE Healthcare. We're also joined by Muralidhara Hosahali, Global Delivery Head, Medical Devices and Life Sciences, L&T Technology Services Limited. We're also joined by Kalavati GV. She's the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Philips Software as Service Transformation, Royal Philips, Bengaluru, Karnataka. Now, we'll also be joined by Mr. K.S. Vishwanathan, Vice President, Industry Initiatives, NASCOM. He'll be joining in a while. Now, so once again, welcome everyone. So grateful for your presence here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shivam. Thanks for the opportunity.
Now, quickly getting into the middle of things, once again saying all my questions are open to the panel, hence we'll be taking your insight, opinions on each questions one by one. So starting with my first question, and I want to go to Mr. Girish Raghavan for this one. How do you think the healthcare landscape in India has evolved over the last couple of years, Mr. Raghavan?
Thank you, Shivam. It's wonderful to be on this panel with Kala and Murli. Both of them I know quite well for a while now. So if you look at the healthcare landscape, Shivam has been going through a major transformation over the last 2 years. And if you look at COVID specifically, has been accelerating the healthcare transformation today, and pretty much every country in the world is experiencing this. So one big transformation we're expecting to see in the next few years is the whole space of telemedicine, telehealth, and so on and so forth, right? Because the industry expectation is that the CAGR growth would be around 31%, reach around 5.4 billion by 2020, which is staggering numbers. So if you look at from a landscape perspective, I actually see three distinct themes today. One is the whole healthcare delivery model is getting transformed significantly. If you look at our own lives, the way we interact with physicians and clinicians in the pre-COVID and post-COVID has changed dramatically. The whole space of telemedicine, telehealth, virtual care, you name it, remote patient monitoring, all these are big changes which we are experiencing today. In fact, today it is very common for us to get into a video call through Practo or any of these digital applications and talk to a doctor. We can't even think of those things in the pre-COVID world, right? To get into virtual interaction. So the whole way the delivery model has changed is significant. Second big thing we are seeing is the acceleration of digital transformation. So this actually comes from the various technologies what we have today in digital. So if you look at the industry today, Shivam is grappling with many problems. One of them is how do we improve productivity? The second being how do we improve the clinical outcomes, which has been a biggest challenge the industry is facing today. Third, there's a lot of burnout of technologists and physicians and clinicians because of the sheer volume of requests coming our way. And more importantly, with all these transformations, the expectation is that we're able to reach to the 3.8 billion people across the world who don't have access to the basic healthcare capabilities. So if you look at these big problems, what we have, technology is playing a big role, especially digital transformation. So be it the work happening on AI, cloud computing, edge computing, and the whole space of machine learning, deep learning, all these things are contributing tremendously towards this digital transformation. And the last thing I would say from a landscape perspective is on the data aggregation. So today, if you go to a doctor, right, if you go to a cardiac doctor and you have a consultation, he would have a big file with him. He'll have ECGs and echoes, and you have the full records of the previous pathology tests and so on and so forth. But typically, he spends maybe a minute and a half to go through a bulk of records, and then he makes his interpretations. So one big challenge the industry is facing, and we're seeing a distinct theme around this, is around the space of data aggregation. The pandemic has actually taught us a lot of values on how we can combine medical history and provide insights, which will be very personalized to the needs of the patient. So today, if you look at the aggregation world, you have genomics data, you have imaging data, you have pathology information, right? You have the previous, the consultations given by the physician. The question is, how do we get that data together, aggregate it, and provide insights which are more meaningful to the patient, right? So basically, these are the three big themes I would say from a healthcare landscape perspective. And the underlying philosophy here is, how do we put the patient in the middle of the ecosystem, right? Until recently, it was not the patient in the middle of the ecosystem. The clinical community was at the middle of the ecosystem. So this whole transformation we are seeing today, the healthcare landscape we are experiencing today, is more about putting patient to the core of the whole ecosystem.
Ms. Kala, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Shivam, for this wonderful opportunity. And I'm very honored to join this session with Girish, Murli, and KSV to join us. I would probably repeat some of the things that Raghavan already stated, right? Basically, Girish already stated. So to start with, the pandemic has taken a significant toll on the patient and the healthcare staff and the healthcare system itself. So amidst the crisis, what stands out is just how skillfully the sector has risen to the challenge. Now, Girish was mentioning about the healthcare landscape in India, which is rapidly transforming in the last few years, which is very, very true. And there is a super acceleration path for digitalization. Okay, there is also a shift observed from a communicable diseases focus to non-communicable diseases, and also the emergence of tier 2 and 3 cities. And as Girish alluded to, India is rapidly adopting the health tech, telemedicine, digital health, AI to get better insights, both at a policy and a consumer level, I would say. At a macro level, we observe government approaching this transformation from predominantly provider to payer and enabler. That is where, like Girish mentioned about patient at the center of everything. So this is going to enable us to leapfrog in the access to care focus. Now, if I look at some of the emerging trends for key indicators, we see healthcare sector grow about 22% CAGR during 2016 to 2022. And also, if you look at the market size, it is about 372 billion. This is the forecast that we have for now, as compared to 110 billion in 2016. Now, if you look at the percentage spend on healthcare in GDP, okay, it is 2.1% of GDP in 2021-22, as against 1.3 in 2019 and 2020, which is a very good progression. And I think we are aiming to get closer to 3% in the coming years. So I think all of us know that there is a rising insurance penetration across the country, right? Now, traditionally, we have seen public health care provision continuously challenged on the adequacy, the coverage, the budget allocation, etc. Now, by introduction of initiatives like PMJ, the Ayushman Bharat, government appears to be adopting more payer role and broader inclusion of private side for the care delivery with its capacity, efficiency, and complementing the public own, the challenges that we have. Now, what I observe is the adoption of bold strategic approach to create state-of-art public good infrastructure to democratize and accelerate the access of quality care, then taking the conventional route. Now, if you look at the ABDM initiative, if we have to scale that to empower our citizen much more on the healthcare, it is similar to what we have witnessed in the years, prior years in finance world with the UPI India Stack. So I'm very hopeful that the initiatives which have started is going to have greater impact as we progress. Now, apart from this, the minute we talk about the healthcare, the policy of regulatory, the frameworks, everything comes into picture, right? Even though it is slow, I think there is progression which is happening, which is more conducive, which is much more sharper, and there is a lot of accountability towards the industry needs. Now, switching on to the payer side, okay, we see the transformation underway. For example, if you look at the OPD, it covers basically the OPD cover being introduced now with the new digital players. And also this also shows the way the healthcare insurance is adapted, and it's going to continue in a progressive way. And also there are green shoots seen in increasing focus on preventive health by influencing behavior via incentives for being fit. Overall, I see there is a lot of progression, and from a private side, the providers are seeking at scale. This is through the network, the connectivity, the digitization, etc. Right? And all in all, I see that the whole ecosystem is steadily maturing, starting with the service discovery, for example, like Girish mentioned some of the examples. I have to quote the Proctor, 1mg, okay, all these things is the start for the service discovery in a very different way, which is focused on platforms, new offerings. Now it is expanding much more to deep technical and clinical focused proposition. All in all, I see a great transformation, India leading the pack in bringing in the transformation across the way the health is provided.
Yeah, just to add to Kala as well as Girish, my perspective in the last 2 years is that the 10, probably less than the 10 grams or milligrams of virus, how it could be able to, create such a havoc, not just an epidemic from the pandemic point of view. I don't think anyone has realized with so-called greedy world, thought about this at all. And of course, it is a completely connected world, right? No more a disconnected world, because it is not that we have seen this kind of a problem today, right? Maybe we may not have seen. Probably it was there in a swine flu and plague and stuff like that, but it was a disconnected world. But today, what made it was that it was complete chaos about 2 years back, exactly in the March of 2020, around that time frame. No one knew what it used to be, and a lot of rumors going around the world. Nobody could able to predict what will work and what will not work. Okay, in that case, in the chaos, actually, I would say in Indian scenarios considered is that having 2 vaccinations, one is from manufactured, other is our own indigenous, with a pace at which required a vaccination to be developed, was a phenomenal job by here. I think that was the key tipping point from the perspective of we have raised to the occasion and ability to solve the 2. We have 1.35 billion people. Okay, then many people, were talking about how India can do these kind of things. There's no way it is possible. And this has created also a trigger for many healthcare as well as a country and to the practitioners, caregivers, the common man, kind of, not having a sufficient, the healthcare ecosystem. This created an eye-opener. At the same time, in this chaos, typically opportunities will rise. And those kind of things which as Girish and Kala both mentioned, there's so many things which came into existence, which was not there. For example, India never had so many ventilators. Forget about ventilators. We were not having the pulse oximeters. In order to find SpO2, we were not having pulse oximeters. We were not having the oxygen generators. We felt so much, in the transporting this oxygen from different countries around the world. We were kind of starving one kind of, nations, industrial nations had a kind of problems like US and Europe, and India and other, low income and countries have a different set of problems. And one thing that they all realized is that in order to sustain and order to come out of this, we need to have right kind of, devices. Even PPE kits were not available in India at that time. And this made India to be, come out of this test, not only having the right vaccinations and producing not the ventilators, I would say, maybe a ambu bag kind of a thing we could be able to give some amount of relief to the patients. And also it was required for to come out with some kind of a digital tracing, I would say. And also the kind of things like a COVID, which was done, was a phenomenal thing in India. It also made the entire healthcare the last 2 years. It made that the majority of the surgery, probably 80% of the planned surgeries did not happen. in India, and around 60% of the unplanned also did not happen. It made a huge skewing of the things in the Indian scenario. And of course, it also resulted in emergence of telemedicine and remote monitoring. Telemedicine is definitely not a new thing at all. But however, because of COVID, it advanced in a significant way. And I would see this has made a lot of point of care devices, which used to be there in glucose or pregnancy as well as the HIV. It also made it very clear it is not just sitting what we have today. It is important to have accessible, affordable, and to the devices which are extremely critical for the mass market. It's extremely important, what I would say. From that trigger, how we have acted, what actions we can take, and how it is evolving, probably the next step in the journey is what I would say.
Mr. Murli, you talked about there that, it was something like we were caught off guard with the pandemic. It was something we had seen some things like this in the past, like the smallpox or the Spanish flu. But I mean, maybe the fatality was not quite as high as the past pandemics, but it was of that kind of amount. It spread all through the world and it spread quickly, and we were, as you mentioned, it was a chaos. So the next question for you is, the pandemic has shown us that the world needs to enhance the healthcare ecosystem to avoid future such crises that might crop up. Do you think there needs to be a collaborative approach to deliver healthcare going forward, now that the pandemic might finally be showing signs of receding backwards?
No, absolutely, absolutely. There is no second thought about that. The collaborative approach of finding a solution in the larger context, having the right ecosystem is extremely important. As I mentioned earlier, in a connected world, if someone coughs in Bay Area, and someone will get a cold in India and Japan and stuff like that. So it's extremely important to, first and foremost, is that with so much of technology innovations are happening, it's extremely important to have a kind of early detection in the healthcare systems. So that is the first fundamental thing, especially in the population management, where getting the data, whether in the form of the Facebook, Twitter, and patient, the visiting to a doctor and drug stores, as well as from the TV, mobile, etc., and getting the data quickly, and then filtering that and getting the right insight, that is a primary thing. Once we get that one, how the government and private, they can take immediate action to contain that area, so that is the first and the foremost, so that it will not become an epidemic or a pandemic. It will be contained into that one. That is the fundamental part of it. Then once we identify, it's also equally important to diagnose the condition and what can be done, how soon it can be done. So in that way, then how to deliver this, or whether it is to be in the hospital environment or in the home care setup. These are the kind of things that can be done from various things. In my view, what is required is to have a right kind of an ecosystem with the government as an enabler. At the same time, the private public partnership and getting the innovative with the social media elements can play a significant role. And because the infrastructure, like in India, with the low-cost countries, are so less. For example, we have only about 0.7 doctors per 1,000, as well as we have a number of beds per 1,000 is hardly 1.3, and there's a number of nurses also like that. Whereas WHO recommends at least 3 nurses per 1,000, and also the beds. At the same time, we need to have about 2.5 like that. So it is required, looking at the whole scheme of things, what kind of things set up we need to have, what kind of innovation, what kind of investment the government has to do, what kind of private companies do, how they can work collaboratively, involving the right startup ecosystem who can able to disrupt. typically work on the, work on the point solution, which can give an immediate solution. And also I will add one more point on the regulatory terms. Typically, what I have seen in my experience is the big companies generally regulatory oriented and take typically more time to come out with the solutions. Barring GE and Philips, they have done a lot of reverse innovation also. Okay, there could be general practices that there is a trend we could see in any big companies. Okay, however, the startup companies, they first and the foremost thing is how dirty and quick are their mantras, and they could be able to get innovative technologies and that is affordable, which is connected, and that is the what it is actually disrupting the entire thing. And data being the center, and there is a barrier between the new age companies. Earlier, it was monopolized by the big OEMs. Because of data, there's a hairline between in the healthcare and data being a drug. ISVs are coming to a major force, a brutal force along with the startup ecosystem. They are using the new AI, ML based models to detect as well as how they can be able to give a better patient experience is what my view is. Yes, in summary, there is definitely a need of a good ecosystem that would help overall from the point of view of patient experience as well as the caregivers. And the last year when Kala was also mentioning that the load on the caregiver the last 2 years were so huge, and using the modern techniques, whether it could be AML based system to reduce the wastage and fraud as well as abuse, using the robots to perform some of the monotonous tasks. These are the innovations that can help in a big way.
Even the pandemic in the last 2 years demonstrated how technology plays a very, very innovative role in managing the healthcare system, including the 2 billion vaccination what we have done. A. B, going forward, the innovation, as my esteemed colleague panel will tell you, is happening at the intersection points. It's never that just in technology like 5G or technology like AI, ML that Murli talked about. The innovation could take place at the intersection points. And if we can just combine the power of technology at intersection points and technology, collaboratively, innovatively, if the people join together, we can find better and frugal and cheaper and easier innovative solution. That is what my essence of viewpoint will be on innovation supercluster, where a group of people, perhaps a startup, perhaps a small and medium enterprise, perhaps a global multinational corporation like Philips and GE, perhaps a large service provider like L&T Technology Services, perhaps academic institution, they all join together, find out those use cases, collectively, collaboratively, the impact is 5x, impact is 10x. This is what we are propagating with the government. This is what we're propagating with the industry. Industry will supportive. I believe we can make a stronger impact.
Yeah, so basically, I cannot emphasize how much the digitization, telemedicine, remote monitoring, interoperability, and also especially the AI, the insights, the power of data coming together that both Murli and then KSV spoke, cannot emphasize enough. What is extremely important is the power of predictive analysis, especially to evaluate the severity, the infection spread, basically the supply situation, etc. And how can we accelerate more from bench to bedside? These are the examples of the vaccination and the solutions both KSV and Murli spoke about. So some of these new ways of doing things and the behavior change, especially, okay, has to persist, which is going to help us to be much more resilient for the future. Okay, apart from this, there is a need for us to sustain the focus in terms of policies, okay, the financial support and infrastructural support and the systemic capability, and more importantly, an integrated approach that both Murli and KSV alluded to. One of the things personally I have experienced, and then which has come up by many of the people, is the way we react to the situation when the pandemic came in, okay? This is where the awareness plays a very, very important role. So how can we improve the overall communication? How can we help people with the mental health and well-being is also something important that we need to focus on. Apart from this, I met with many of the customers and the stakeholders during this whole I would say, in the last few months. What they are talking about is, how can you train people? You're bringing in new vaccines, you're bringing in new support systems, right? And new ventilators, etc. And many of them fail to understand how to operate it. So how to bring in the human design to the solutions, and then how to improve the awareness, the training of this providers is something very, very important. So I would like to reiterate what KSV said. The only way that we can accelerate this is to learn from the pandemic, and it is an ecosystem and a connected play, right? How can the whole ecosystem come together, the governments, the institutions, and also the healthcare, like, companies like Philips, GE, etc. And also how can Murlis of the world come together in order to create this momentum and then form the super cluster and get us, like, much more, much more stronger to face any of the situations going forward is very, very important.
I think Kala, KSV, and Murli covered pretty much all the big things which we have. But broadly, I would say, if you look at the discussion has been that when we have a pandemic of this magnitude in the future, right, we have lessons which we have learned on predictive, on the proactive and the reactive side. I think Kala covered some of the reactive part very, very well. So these are going to be, right? So we have lessons learned on all the three areas: preventive, proactive, and predictive. I think between Murli, KSV, and Kala, we covered pretty much. But I have two additional points to add to what was discussed so far. One is there has to be a lot of stronger collaboration between pharma companies and the devices companies. It's primarily because you cannot afford to take 10 years to make a vaccine, right? If you look at the kind of struggles we went through in the initial days of vaccine development, we need a lot of data. Traditionally, pharma has been I would say a box by itself. And there are a lot of time it would take to go through in getting the vaccine delivered. We don't have that luxury going forward, right? Especially if we have a new occurrence of a pandemic in the future. The collaboration which we establish between the pharma companies and the devices companies is going to go a long way to significantly reduce the time it would take, because the device companies and the hospital ecosystem would provide so much of data which would help the pharma companies to come with much more accurate and predictive vaccines than we could additionally do in the past. Right? I think that is one big thing I would emphasize on. The second thing I would emphasize on is on the whole focus on what we call the precision medicine. Right. So if you look at today, just take an example of India. Right. The non-communicable diseases still contribute around 60% of all the deaths which happen in the country. And out of the 60%, around 82% is because of cardiovascular diseases, chronic respiratory diseases, could be cancer, could be diabetes, and so on and so forth, right? And if you look at what the pandemic has shown us is that this is the vulnerable population. If you go back and look at the what happened in the last couple of years, this subset of the people were the most vulnerable of what we have seen. So as we get towards precision medicine, right, we need to have a lot of data, big data, captured over a period of time. And from big data, we should be able to come with very good analytics, I would say predictive analytics on able to come with precision medicine focused towards those targeted audience. I sometimes believe that if we had some of these things we're talking today in the pre-COVID world, the number of deaths we saw during the last couple of years would have come down dramatically. So these are just additional 2 points I would like to add on top of what Kala, KSV, and Murli alluded to.
So I have one more point to add. In the collaborative environment is also extremely important to involve academia in a big way.
Yes.
Because that is another piece in which most of the Western world, they have utilized that in a significant way. And at LTTS, we are also trying in multiple such companies, such academia institutions. But the feedback is not great. At the same time, if we can bring the accountability, with a lot of research is going on, if we can able to make, for example, today in India, 85% of the medical devices are being imported. Okay, that's a huge one. Okay, we designed one of the hematology analyzer to one of the startup company in Kerala. Last year, it was designed and developed completely from us, including a crystal. Okay, and so made in India. And what I'm saying is that if there is a trust, using academia, having their own patents, and also develop with a low cost for serving this kind of countries, because India is going to be the most populous country by next year. That's what I was seeing the news channel a couple of days back. And the number of people, as Kala as well as Girish mentioned, the people are also the one is age population and a chronic things which cannot be controlled, it has to be managed. And that is growing significantly, and also number of people going from below middle class to middle class level is so significant, and the per capita income is increasing. At the same time, they are also becoming 1 in 4 Indians over the age of 18 becoming having a hypertension, and diabetes capital of the world. Unless we design devices which are accessible and affordable to the this mass, because still India is a poor country, irrespective of things, and we have a large talent pool. I strongly feel that academia, as well as request our panel members to have some percentage of investment, that can be given to this kind of a subcontinent, which will actually significantly explode the market. Whatever Kala Madam earlier was talking about, a 350 billion is that can happen so easily. Already this 350 billion that can go to several folds in the coming years. And we have the right talent, whether it is from the genome sequencing to the point of care devices, as well as the AML, telemedicine, remote monitoring, we do have, but is require a collaborative approach from the OEMs, as well as a startup and also service providers like us, along with the unmet needs of the practitioners, medical practitioners, and that would help patient experience better is the future. That's what I would say. And government need to enable it. And I always think, my proposition is that, including one of the ISVs, for example, I want to take few villages. Why don't you take it as a pilot and get all the data from all these villages, what kind of problems in those villages are happening? If the data comes in and you can store it using the analytical model, we can able to come out and say, hey, this is what is happening in this part of the world. If we can able to do a pilot of this kind of thing, having 3 to 4 such a group, that will be amazing. That would help. Anyway, we cannot boil the ocean. If can be done as a pilot, and government as a NASCAN, as a facilitator, it's going to benefit significantly in India. That's what I would say.
And now I want to come to Mr. Raghavan again. Mr. Raghavan, how do you think enterprises, and now that Ms. Murli also mentioned startups and talent, so how do you think enterprises and startups can help improve the future of healthcare ecosystem through the development of newer solutions and products?
Yeah, so frankly speaking, right, no big company can solve all the problems the industry is facing today. Right? So be it GE, Philips, or the large companies which we are in healthcare space, because it's impossible, right? We have so many problems the industry is facing today. So what we're looking for is how can these startups today, right, can come in and complement what each of the companies are providing today. And this is the approach what we are doing in GE today. So today, if you look at just in India alone, we have more than 3,000 plus health tech startups just in India. And during the pandemic, we saw there's a changing perception of startups and healthcare deliveries. So generally, there's been a bit of aversion towards startups, how they will meet the expectations, how they will co-create, how they will coexist, how will they provide a much more seamless workflow integration and so on forth, right? So we have seen in the post-pandemic world, the focus has shifted towards technology-enabled solutions. We have seen that telemedicine is taking the center stage. There's a lot of focus towards digitization of health records and so on and so forth, right? And then on top of this comes the whole question of predictive analysis, what Kala was referring to. Right? So we are seeing that startups have a tremendous potential to complement and fill the gaps at a pace in which none of the large companies can ever attempt to do it. So what some of the trends we are seeing in industry is having a joint collaboration with startups, where the startups can complement what we have from a large healthcare providers, and then we help each other and in the process provide a much more useful and seamless customer experience. One of the big challenges that customers are facing today is that they come and tell us that we have so many startups coming to us every day, and they have so many solutions with them. We don't know what is right. We don't know what is seamless. Would have to hire a new person to work on it. I need everything to be on the console. I want much more seamless integration with my CTs and MRs. So if you look at from a customer perspective as well, they're expecting much more seamless workflow integration, and that is what led to this whole collaboration between startups and large companies. So definitely we're seeing a large potential there. And if you look at some of the work being done by large companies in India specifically, there's a lot of focus towards building startup accelerator programs, and especially if you look at healthcare, G-Healthcare specifically, we have been having this Edison Accelerator program every year. I think we have gone through 3 cohorts, and we have actually onboarded around 17 startups. We went very specifically on certain areas on which we don't have the expertise on, right? We went after genomics, we went after oncology, certain very niche areas in oncology. We went after data-based startup companies. So every year we come up 2 or 3 big themes, which we think is going to add to the portfolio what we have. And we actually request applications from many of the startups we have in the industry today. And they go through a rigorous process. We finally choose 6 startups in a cohort. And these 6 startups are mentored by a business leader within the company, a technology leader, right, who would technically help them in going forward with their solution. We also have a clinical mentor. So we assign a physician or a clinician from one of the leading partners we have. And we also provide them with the ecosystem on which they can go and test it. So we have collaboration with various hospitals today in India. So we have a solution deployed there, and we would request these startups to go there and do a pilot and figure out how it works and so on and so forth. So we have a need for complementing. The startups can complement us very, very well. They can go much faster in certain areas where we don't have the core competency on. Customers are asking for it. And what we are doing as a company, and most large companies are doing, is providing an ecosystem where these startups can come, thrive, evolve, and then provide solutions for our customers. So this is how I think these startups are going to change the future of healthcare in the years ahead.
I'll probably reiterate some of the points. If you look at the healthcare entrepreneurial scene, it is rapidly evolving. It is emerging as one of the top 5 sectors for the investors, and then growing at a pace of 35 plus % CAGR in the last 5 years. Now, as Girish rightly mentioned, active participation by large enterprises like ours in fueling more of the startups to get into the space is extremely important. So if you look at our own examples within India, we have noted moves by players like Tata in 1mg, Reliance and Netmeds, Adani announcing plans to foray, etc. This will really increase the entrepreneurial momentum in the medium term. So for me, enterprises and the startup is complementary to each other. Girish mentioned this very adequately, very nicely. For aspects like startups addressing adjacencies, unexplored areas, and for them, speed of innovation is unmatchable by big enterprises like ours. So this is where, if we can get the speed of innovation and very niche areas from the startup, the big companies like ours can address the scaling, because that is where the startups really struggle. Okay, not only scaling, but the processes, the go-to-market strategy. This is where we can complement the startups. So for me, it is a trinity of clinical providers, enterprise, the startups, and also the rest of the ecosystem has to come together to accelerate the right healthcare problem to be solved at scale and with profitability and with agility and optimal outcomes for every involved stakeholders. So this is where the thing which comes to my mind is the quadruple aim. Whatever we do should be outcome focused. It should really improve the caregiver's experience. It should improve the patient experience. And also we should be very, very focused on optimizing the cost of care.
Yeah, I think I heard Kala and Manoj, they give a beautiful exposition of how the individual company are solving their problems, process, tremendous effort. Just expand that from a company to an industry level. Industry level, just imagine if there is and there is a real opportunity and there is a real possibility also. Philips and GE, academic institutions, startups, L&T, they're all joining together to solve the industry's problem. when I say industry's problem, the larger ecosystems problem. If we can create that with government funding, with 50% of funding government taking place, so that you reduce the risk for individual companies, see the power of innovation we can have place in India itself. This is what we are saying as a concept of innovation supercluster beyond in specific problem to solve. I'll give an example in healthcare. The PepsiCo may be solving its problem to solve its business challenges. Whereas if they all join together to solve the agri-tech challenge in the country, the problem is different. Problem statement is different. If Philips, GE, L&T, and other companies can join to solve the health tech challenge in the country, the problem statement is different. That is what we are working with all of them to work together to create the innovation supercluster, which is going to be a reality soon.
Thank you. So in this regard, as a company of L&T Technologies, we are also looking at how we can help our customers as well as the users. For example, we are talking about the non-invasive electrolyte testing. Instead of we already have pregnancy markers and other things which can be done glucose monitoring at home, how we can able to do it electrolyte testing at home itself. Similarly, we are also looking at working with the sepsis detection using a microfluidics instead of having large capital equipment. So we have tied up with academia and how we can able to bring this product to a solution. And because sepsis, as you know, it's an infection that can able to take the person out in a few hours. And the continuous, these are the kind of things in a collaborative way, because we being a services, our interest is to how to help or to give a time to market advantage to our customers like GE and Philips and Medtronic and stuff like that. Similarly, we collaborate with academia and hospitals along with the startup companies, how we can able to bring a value to the entire ecosystem. That is what we are working on. I think there is everybody work, whatever the case we have told, it makes a lot of sense. And we should have a accountability. I think the government has initiated a initiative like a BIRAC, but if we can able to make it more accountable and also run in an agile way or some other, whatever the fastest way, and that makes a lot of sense.
Now I want to come to again to Mr. Raghavan. Mr. Raghavan, we are already seeing, artificial intelligence and machine learning reshaping the way healthcare services were delivered in giant magnitude. What else are we expecting from AI and ML going into the future?
So I think if you look at the way AI and ML is going to help, right? Firstly, there's a lot of myth and misconception about what AI and ML can do. And I would say two areas, in my opinion, are going to be huge, Shivam. One is how we react to improving clinical outcomes, right? See, today, if you look at the third largest cause of death in the world is medical errors, right? After cardiovascular disease and cancer, maybe this is the third largest cause of death in the world today. And it's partly because if you look at a typical radiologist, right, he walks into his room in the morning, 8 o'clock, and he spends maybe 10 to 12 hours going through X-ray images and CT scans back to back throughout the day. And he's also under tremendous pressure to make so many reports in a day and so on and so forth. 10 years back or 5 years back, you would have seen maybe 10 CT scans a day, but today he may be seeing around 100 CT scans a day, right? So it's a lot of things to do back to back. So one thing what AI and ML is going to help in the days ahead, in fact, they're already doing it to a large extent, is it is going to provide a lot of assist mechanism through which clinicians can make good decision making, right? So we're not going to replace, AI ML is not going to replace technologists or radiologists. AI and ML is going to assist radiologists to make decisions in a very informed manner, thereby democratizing the quality of care what people are going to get. So if you take a typical PET scan, we know of cases where, right, 5 years later, 3 years later, and we go back and look at the PET scan, there could have been a small dot which looked very trivial. Maybe that is something which caused and became a lesion of a bigger magnitude a few years down the line. So AI/ML can look at the data and just assist in putting a small circle around it and just tell the clinician, look, I see something suspicious here. Maybe you should just look at it. Maybe it's not a problem, ignore it. If it's a problem, act on it. Right? So that is one area where we are seeing AI/ML playing a big role. The other area where where we're seeing a major role getting played is on the way the workflows are getting optimized in the years ahead. if you look at hospitals today are under tremendous pressure, right? See today, what we used to have CT systems lying in hospitals, you do maybe 3 scans in a day, 4 scans in a day. Today, if you go to a large hospital, you find a lot of patients standing in queue for a CT or a PET scan, right? So if you go and ask our consumers or customers today, their biggest problem is they're not asking for the cutting edge 5,000 slice CT. What they're asking us is, how can my workflow become more optimal? Today, if I can do 20 patients, can I do 21 patients with my CT scanner? So that is the kind of question they're asking us. And I think that is where AI and ML is going to play a large role. To give an instance, I would say that today the CT systems are pretty intelligent, right? The CTs of today. If you go back and look at the CTs years back, CTs were a dumb system. The operator has to be very smart to operate the CT system. The operator would tell to the CT system, start a scan, it will start a scan. The operator would say, stop, it will stop. It will say, send, it will send, right? But the CTs of today and the future, as we evolve, are going to be so smart that the CT system would tell the operator what to do, right? So today, if you look at some of the CT scanners which we have in the industry today, are so smart enough that the CT scan, before it starts, back and check with the risk system or with the risk system, look at the EMR records, and it could recommend to the operator or technologist saying that for this patient, if the patient is obese with this history data, you need to have a particular protocol being selected, right? We have CTs which are smart, or MRs which are smart enough to go and tell the technologist, look, this patient has moved quite a lot. I don't think the image is of good quality. Maybe you should do a rescan, right? So these are the kind of efficiency and throughput and productivity what you're going to see in the years ahead. So I think these are the two big areas I would see a large transformation happening in the healthcare space because of AI and ML-based technology. Definitely, this is not true that it's going to replace technologists or radiologists. I think it's far from that. It's going to help them to be more efficient and productive.
Yeah, I think, by the way, Ragan covered it, everything, right? Because it's all about smart, intelligent systems, which is going to support in a timely manner to make the best decision, okay, precise decision. One of the other areas that I would say that where we have to focus for this to happen is the availability of the right data to build the right AI models for providing the better insights. This is where the federated data, the learning systems are coming into picture, where we need to mature that for us to drive better outcomes. Finally, it is about bringing in the concept of digital twins. Okay, this is where the AI ML is going to be the foundation, and the way we are able to progress towards that is going to help us to be much more predictive, okay, and really help with healthy living for everybody.
Could you share your perspective on the future roadmap for healthcare R&D in India, as well as how the establishment of a super innovation cluster for a robust ecosystem can help?
Okay, let me take an example of Philips and then answer your question. Okay, so it has been 25 years. Okay, this is the 26th year of Philips Innovation Campus, one of the 4 innovation campus of Philips, okay, across the world. So we started off with humble beginning with 5 people. Now we have quite a big establishments looking at it from an end-to-end perspective. For instance, over 50% of the software is getting delivered from here, and then 80% of the platforms, which is extremely important for all the factors that we talked about until now, is getting delivered from here. So progressively, we have started off from just a software development to slowly move into understanding the customer needs and then understanding the ecosystem. And not only do we look at the global programs, but also some of the regional markets that we are dealing with. Okay, so in summary, there is a good progression from just a development service provider to owning some of the transformational solutions, which we can pilot, incubate in India, make it work here, and then see how we can globalize it. Okay, this is the approach which is slowly changing. But at the same time, the ER&D setup is delivering to the global programs. So this is where we get exposure to what are the global trends, what are the global customer needs, and then how can we learn from that, and then see how can we make it work for India and vice versa, right? Going forward, the biggest challenge for us is how can we get to a point where we can lead some of the transformational things for the world itself. This is where the capability, okay, of the people have to be built, which is all around the product management, which is very closer to the customer, understanding the customer needs and working backwards. Because until now, we were so much focused on the technology, etc. Technology is more of an enabler towards end goal. So this is where I would say that going forward with the super cluster, the healthcare super cluster coming together, where all of us, the industry, the different stakeholders in the industry is coming together, we can actually help complement each other in order to deliver the quadruple aim that I was talking about, which is all about focusing on the outcomes. Okay, this is where we talk about the value-based care. It is not about CTMR, but it's actually looking at the wellness of the patient, right? How can we improve the operational efficiency? How can we enable the caregivers to focus on the patients, right? And how can we improve, like, the human design, human part of the design, and improve the experience of the patients itself, and really focusing on reduction of cost. So this is where I think there is a great opportunity for the industries, the academia, everybody coming together and really working, forming the super cluster for healthcare, and see how India can play a big role in the global ecosystem to deliver outcomes. And also, if you look at the value that India brings, okay, the number of capable engineers and then all the practitioners around the end-to-end scale, we have quite a lot. And we have the intelligence, the framework, the support from the government now, which is going to help us to accelerate this journey to transform healthcare and see how we can make a difference to the globe.
Whenever I put my mask, I take my video off. No, I'll put it this way. Everything else to what Kala has said, I would only add, by nature, there is Indians are frugal in mind. So ability to test in a frugal way, perhaps succeed in a big way, perhaps fail in a very small way, collaborating together. But the good news is there is an intent. And the very good news is leaders like Kalavati, who are all part of the ER&D ecosystem, are very supportive of the thought processes, what we have to build it. The even more better news is the government of India is also very supportive to create this concept. It is just not a question of if, it is a question of when. You can expect perhaps in the next 12 to 18 months' time, various concepts the leaders talked about would enable India to take a 3x growth in the ER&D revenue. Currently, the ER&D revenue is approximately $33 billion of export. Innovation supercluster, in our opinion, perhaps can generate the fillip and catalyst that is required to take it to 100 billion mark in the next 5 years, 6 years. That's a vision what we have. It's a goal we have. That's the reason leaders like the L&T Technology Services, Philips Innovation Center, GE, all of us working together to make this mission a success.
Yeah, and KSV, just to add, this is where NASSCOM has enabled us to come together much more strongly to focus on those fewer, better, bigger bets, which is going to have better outcomes for us, I would say.
Mr. Murli has joined back. So, Mr. Murli, we are talking about the healthcare ER&D in India and how the establishment of a super innovation cluster for a robust ecosystem can help.
So, in fact, there's absolutely no doubt, and this is the area which could able. Can you able to hear me properly now? Is it
yes,
better?
yes. Yeah, it's
okay.
better.
Okay. So, this is going to be a major result in the coming years. As we talked about already on this topic, on a collaborative way, how can you able to spend, each of the large companies can able to, put investment that is, in the area of whatever we discussed so far, new technology and innovation, and coming out together and to have, to mass taking care of the affordability, availability, and accessibility. Because still the accessibility of the conventional devices, I'm not even talking about the omics and stuff like that. Even the conventional devices, for example, number of mammograms in India is hardly less than 3,000, and the PET CT is hardly about 150, not more than that. So that make it available, having a product that is more useful to this kind of a low income group like India. And I would strongly feel that will be the future. And as I mentioned earlier, we are importing 86% of the medical devices, and government also has given an automatic route giving a tax relaxations. I think having a right investment And we should utilize that and make it in a big way is what I would say, especially in the technology of point of care devices, remote monitoring, as well as the genome sequencing and the in vitro diagnostics area.
Kala and KSV and Murli covered most of it. But I would just say one point is that generally in India, the R&D spend has been not as high as it has been in other countries. So we spend close to 0.6% of our GDP overall in R&D, right? Look at most countries outside of like US and China, they're all upwards of 2%, and we are still like 4% something, 4.3%. So definitely the R&D investments in India is much lower than what we are seeing. Exceptions are like what I mentioned, right? Companies like have been tremendously investing in research and development. So if you look at Indian government specifically, they've been taking a lot of steps towards this. Most of you know about PLI, right? The production linked incentives, which is more towards manufacturing. I know the government of India is also thinking on similar lines for research and development, right? So policymakers are doing, if you look at Niti Aayog, for example, they're working on a strategic roadmap for medical devices on how we can incentivize research and development and so on and so forth. So a lot of things are happening in that space. There are multiple governments within the country, state governments who have been also working on similar directions of getting funds specifically for incentivizing research and development, because the one, it is tough. Definitely R&D is much tougher. It takes a lot of time to build expertise and depth. I think Kala covered that. But what is more important is the cascading impact of R&D is going to be tremendous, right? The R&D would trigger the entire ecosystem. Manufacturing is a byproduct of that. The supply ecosystem is a byproduct of that. So definitely the long way to go, apart from the pockets of clusters what we have. But this is one area we have a significant way to progress. And from whatever discussions I'm aware of, the government of India is quite, and the state governments are very keen on taking this forward.
Mr. Raghavan, to conclude the proceedings for today, I would like to ask you the last question, and to the panel as well. It'll be open after that. What, according to you, are the key digital pillars that will play an instrumental role in transforming the healthcare system in the times to come?
Definitely, from whatever we discussed so far about AI, MLD, all those technologies, 5G is going to play a big role. 5G is going to transform the way healthcare would get delivered in the years ahead. I don't know how many of you would even recall, right? If you go back, 15 years back, before we had 4G and 3Gs and GPRS and edge things, it's impossible, right? Today we can't even go back to that world. Today this looks normal. 4G looks normal today, but 5G is going to take us to a different level, because 5G is supposed to be 100x faster than 4G, low latency, high reliability, less flutters, a lot of benefits of 5G versus 4G. So I think there's going to be huge transformational, in my opinion. Cloud computing is going to be huge for us, because cloud is going to put the patient at the middle of the ecosystem. It's an enabler towards that. And then, of course, the MLDL is definitely going to play a big role. The other area which is less spoken about, Shivam, which is actually getting a lot of momentum, is the whole focus on additive manufacturing, right? Printing and additive manufacturing is also going to be quite transformational, especially in surgical procedures, and maybe in a lot of areas in robotics, etc. Right? You'll find a lot of applications of additive manufacturing coming along way as well. So these, I think, are big technology enablers as we see today.
You covered it beautifully, Girish. Apart from this, few things I would like to add. More than the digital, it is about the enabling stuff. This is where the people and the experience, the human-centered design for frictionless experience comes into picture. And also the governance and then trust. This is where the data privacy, security, explainable AI-enabled clinical and operational decision support, all these things comes into picture. And apart from this, I think interoperability is going to take a center stage, right? So this is my additional thoughts.
There's a huge opportunity for technology to play a very significant role. Whatever questions you ask, Kalavati, will lead to any displacement jobs. No, I think she answered it well. Intelligence in the product is going to go up, and more intelligence in the product will go up. The more and more intelligent company will get a different kind of people, and that is going to open technology healthcare is the biggest thing to happen. Best is yet to come.
Thanks again, once again, everybody. Those were some great insights and a lot of takeaways on what is to come in the future of healthcare, and how the transformation is taking place and will continue to take place in the times ahead. Once again, thanks, and thanks for joining us, taking out the time to do this from your busy schedules. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye.